There will be now.
Okay, we sorted? Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So we go to the main body of the agenda, and first of all, agenda item 1 is apology for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Jill Slocum and Councillor Brian Bolt. Councillor Lance Doddridge will be subbing for Councillor Slocum.
Thank you. That brings us to minutes of the previous meeting, and that's on pages 17 to 22 of your report. Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, Chair, it was just a quick query I raised, and I did flag it up before the meeting. It was just in the past we've tended to record when votes have been taken, the proposed and seconders, and then the vote. Through the minutes that we've got in front of us, it's not consistent. So on a couple of them, there is no record of proposed and seconders, but on the other one there is. So I think whichever way we go, we need to be consistent. So it was just really to raise that and ask what is the position and can we continue to do that, whatever it is, in a consistent way.
Thank you, Chair. It's not consistent around the county. I have to admit with the other area committees, but that's absolutely fine. There's no reason why we can't do it, and we'll go back to doing it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for consistency and clarity, it's useful to have that there. So thank you for that, and thank you for pointing that out. So bearing that in mind, are the minutes agreed as a correct record? All in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous for those who were at the meeting. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Ms. Lehman, would you like to take us through and explain for the members of the public here today about declarations, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask members if they have any declarations of interest, please? So, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Item number 6, Coombatch. I'm predetermined and I will be leaving the chamber for the whole of the item.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Yes, can I make a declaration? I'm a member of the Internal Drainage Board, but I've taken no part in any discussions at that board in terms of any of the planning application for us today.
Thank you. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you. I'm a CMS Councillor for ADB, and I haven't spoken to anybody or moved into discussions on anything.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford.
So,
and Councillor Doddridge.
Drainage Board.
Drainage Board as well. Thank you very much. And Councillor Bruce.
Yeah, Drainage Board for me as well, thank you.
Drainage Board. So for the members of the public, some of the councillors has declared that they're members of the IDB, which is the Internal Drainage Board. So the IDB is a consultative body that has made or have been consulted upon in terms of the applications that are before the committee today. So members who say that they have taken no part means that they did not hear the application at consultative stage, so they are not predetermined and therefore will not come to this committee with an open mind. Sorry, will come to this committee with an open mind, and say they will listen to the debate and they will cast their vote accordingly. Where a member has said they're predetermined, it means that they have already made their mind up about the application that is before us for determination today. So because they've already made their mind up, they are predetermined, so their decision could be prejudiced. So in that case, they are declaring that they will leave the room for that item and they will not take any part in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more, so we will move on to agenda item 4, which is public question time. There are a few speakers here today, members of the public, and I'll call you to the table in turn when the item that you've come to speak about is being debated. I need to say at this point, there is additional submission on agenda item 6, the Wedmore application, and that has been allowed at my discretion. Mr. Human is a former Sedgemoor District Councillor who was given specific assurance at the last meeting of the Sedgemoor District Council by the leader of Somerset Council that he would continue to be consulted and involved in the application. He's made a submission which unfortunately is not here in person, but it will be read out by Mr. Noon at the appropriate time. So this, I have to say, is an exceptional circumstance, but that is the reason why an additional submission is being allowed. So that takes us on to the first of the applications. So that's agenda item 5 on page 23. First, I'll refer to Mr. Noon, I think has an update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to suggest that this application be deferred to enable some reconsultations and clarifications of the proposal to be carried out. The description of development there on the screen, change of use of agricultural field for provision of caravan pitches. That's an element that is new. That is not the bit that we have queried. But there is the reference there to continuation of existing caravan site for use by HPC workers. Now, that is a site that's previously got permission. The applicant erroneously thought that previous permission was wider than it actually is. As a result, the first part of that, which is the new bit, has been understated in the application. It's for about 40 more caravans than the application sets out to apply for. We think that is a material change that will need to be clarified, taken out to reconsultation, and it would not be right to determine the application today based on the submission and the report presented to you. We'll take it away, clarify the details, reconsult, update the report, and bring it back to you in due course. But it would not be a safe decision to make on the basis of what has been presented today. And apologies for that coming out relatively late in the day.
Is there anybody here for the Cannington application? No, fortunately no. So, thank you. So at this point, I need to make a recommendation and proposal that we defer the Cannington application until appropriate time. Seconded by Councillor Martin. All in favour, please show. That is unanimous, so thank you. That item, oh, sorry.
That's one further clarification that could be done when you sort out the wording. When I read this originally, it's not 100% clear as to whether it's the whole development that is only for the set period of time, or whether the first bit is time unlimited. The report seems to imply it is all time limited, but you just need to make sure the description makes that clear as well.
And noted, that is another issue with the description of development the applicant wants to clarify. So yes, on that one already. Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to item 6 on the agenda, page 46, the application for land at Kingbatch Wedmore. And at this point, I will ask Councillor Martin to leave the room, please. Thank you. And Mr. Freeze will be taking us through the reports. And you're ready. Thank you.
Apologies. This application has previously been before the planning committee. It was deferred from the planning committee in the summer last year for a member site visit. There was a member site visit carried out. So at the end of the presentation, I think we will need to go around the table for the members who were present. Because of the time delay between it originally being heard by planning committee and this committee meeting, there was a further site visit undertaken last week. So members who were present at the site visit can give their comments in terms of the issues that were raised in the previous meeting and their responses on it. For the benefit of other members who weren't here during the last application, I'm just going to run through the presentation as presented first time. So apologies for everyone who sat through this once already. And just include a couple of updates that have happened since the application was originally before members. So the application is a hybrid application, so it's part in full and part in outline. Planning permission is sought for 26 dwellings, and the outline permission is sought for self-build. at Coombatch in Wedmore. So the application's been subject to a number of revisions and a reduction in the scheme, but is before members as there remains a parish council objection and a high level of local objection, which is set out in the officer's report. The parish council objection raises concerns in principle and raises concerns in terms of the housing needs assessment, particularly given the other developments that have been consented in the area. And concern was also raised regarding the self-built plots being relied on as affordable housing, which was in the first submission of the application, but is not the fact now, and conflict with the proposal with the adopted neighbourhood plan and local plan, lack of local facilities, highway safety, and impact on heritage and ecology. So this application has also been subject to a Habitats Regulations assessment, which was agreed by members in the previous committee, and therefore the conditions recommended as part of that are incorporated into this report. The application was originally presented to members in July last year and has been subject to site visits, as I said earlier, one in the summer and the second one undertaken last week. The application was re-advertised in August to include chimneys on the front-facing plots. And this slide sets out the main considerations for the application that I will come to through the presentation. So this slide shows the outline of the site in red, with the conservation area shown hatched in purple on the opposite side of Wells Road. The settlement boundary is shown with a green line running along Coombe Lane to the northwest of the site and along Wells Road to the south. The site lies outside of the settlement boundary, but is well related in terms of adjoining it. There are listed properties shown with the orange crosses. If members can just make out, there's listed properties here with the orange crosses. And a looser cluster of properties to the east of the site, which is this cluster here. Near the bottom of this plan, there's also a dashed footpath, and I will show photos from the site of this elevated viewpoint later. This was one of the main concerns in terms of visual impact of the scheme. So this is an aerial view of the site, and the footpath is located to the south. The construction site, as shown in the northwest corner of the site, is now complete. So that was one of the other development sites that have been delivered in the area. So policy T2A sets out the criteria for minimum growth and includes criteria-based policy for releasing sites outside of the settlement boundary. Beyond this, beyond the original level set out in T2A, T2B does allow consideration for further sites outside of but well related to the settlement boundaries where there remains an unmet local affordable housing need. The criteria in the policy is set out on this slide, and I will come to this throughout the application. So there's been a lot of local objection regarding the conflict of the development with WED3, which is a neighbourhood plan policy, which supports the provision of affordable housing in accordance with the local plan. So this policy sets out the requirement for the development under T2B, and it requires any applications coming forward under that policy to have regard for the site assessment evidence that was prepared as part of the adoption for the neighbourhood plan. So this site was promoted, and I will come on to this shortly. So this policy also requires the tenure split, so the nature of affordable housing, to reflect the Wedmore Housing Needs Assessment or subsequently updated evidence. So the site was considered for allocation within the Wedmore neighbourhood plan, and it was rejected as other promoted sites were considered to be more suitable. So this site on this table is W003, which is this column here. The scored matrix was considered a good indicator, which showed a negative red rating on landscape and proximity to facilities, public transport, and limited walking and cycling connections. The site was marked as possible, amber, in terms of proximity to the settlement boundary, vicar access, public right-of-way, and historic environment. And the principle of the site was considered as positive, green, in respect of size, pollution, contamination, ground conditions, and access to mains drainage. A number of sites considered through the site assessment at the time were inside the settlement boundary and considered to be more sustainable than this site, so therefore it was rejected as part of the neighbourhood plan. In addition to the matrix scoring, a qualitative assessment of the site was undertaken, which raised the above and concluded that the site should be discounted on access and safety issues. All of the above points are material to the consideration of the application and their constraints in terms of the site. The detail of the application has sought to mitigate or address the above issues. So if members are satisfied that the proposal manages this, then there is no conflict with WED 3. As the development has considered the site assessment, they've just sought to address the constraints through the detail of the application. So the application was originally submitted to us in 2020 and referenced the Housing Needs Survey for 2018. The development of the site was proposed for 34 dwellings and suggested 4 one-bed, 4 two-bed, 2 three-bed properties as shared ownership or affordable rent, and 1 3-bed self-build and 3 4-bed self-builds as affordable. It was confirmed with the developer that self-build dwellings would not be considered affordable in respect of T2B, which does require 40% affordable market relative, affordable housing relative to the market dwellings. So given other developments in the area, at the time the previously identified need was considered to be accommodated for, and a revised housing need was undertaken at the end of 2022. Any MS were commissioned by the developer to undertake a housing needs assessment, which had 96 responses, and of these, 82 were considered to be able to meet their own housing needs or did not provide sufficient information to establish need. So 14 respondents were considered to be in housing need with a requirement to move in the next 5 years, and they would qualify for affordable or social rent. The need identified by these households are set out in bold on the bottom and matches the affordable housing accommodation proposed as part of this submission. The principle and scale of development is therefore considered to be acceptable in accordance with T2B and subject to the detailed considerations that have been raised. So this slide shows the original layout for the site, which detailed a gable end on plot 3. So that's this one. So gable end quite close to the road frontage here and the listed buildings that we referenced earlier. In the west corner of the site, and a hard frontage to the affordable dwellings. That was these ones to the front here. And these were proposed in close proximity to the boundary hedge, which is proposed to be pulled back on the site, which would have impacted on amenity. So rear parking courtyards are also not particularly characteristic of the area, and the built form of development on the northern boundary was considered to show minimal gapping and would have appeared dense relative to the surrounding area. So the blue area at the bottom of the site here is where the self-builds are proposed to go. And to the front of this, that's the orchard. So we'll come on to this in more detail shortly, but that's outside of the application site and is retained as part of this scheme. So this is an aerial view from the site from a public right-of-way from the field immediately to the rear of the property on Mill Lane. This view was taken in the height of the summer, and once you pass the hedge boundary to the east, the existing landscaping prevents any further views of this site. So just for members' information, the application site is this land parcel here. That's the start of the development. This edges the orchard here, so it goes down to this level. To the rear here, there's a residential property and a number of outbuildings down to about here, and members can see the allotments from this elevated viewpoint. The application is seen with the residential development to the front and the side of the site, with Mendip View and some of the outbuildings visible beyond the north boundary. And the orchard is shown to the frontage. So that's this area here. You can see granted the highway is just below this point. There were concerns raised by an objector that we weren't clearly showing this site. So this is an objector's photograph of the same site taken from the same location. And following a site visit, apologies, this is over a number of slides to try and get it in. So a further view was taken during the site visit last week, showing the site this time of year. So this shows the property surrounding the site and the residential dwelling to the rear boundary and associated outbuildings. from this viewpoint, particularly when outside of the summer, you can see the site in context of the development to the east and the allotments. Although this is not visible once the trees are fully leaved, the site is also not visible from the adjoining field. So from this site, this is the new development that was under construction. I showed members in the previous slide. This bit of green is the application site. Entrance into the site is in this location here, and development on the road frontage extends up to this cream property here, and then slightly further down there. So on to the next slide. So this was the cream property. We mentioned these are the outbuildings for the neighbouring property that goes down to here. The built form of development currently is extending up to about here. This is the self-build element, and that's the allotments behind. And again, this is planning further down. So again, that's the allotments extending down. This is the edge of where the self-builds would go. And then at the bottom of the site, there's a nursery building and sort of looser knit development that was highlighted in my previous one. So this just pans the full length of the site. Members can see the orchard to the front and the adjoining end of the site. There's a continuation of the built form with the nursery building and more sporadic residential dwellings. So these again are screened by leaves in the summer period, but this view, they're not apparent from the adjoining field. So proposed development of the site would result in the loss of a green space, but it is officers' view that given the justified need and relationship of the site to the settlement boundary and surrounding properties, the building would not cause a detrimental impact. So the next couple of slides to provide some context of the site. So this shows views courtesy of Street View, showing the built form to the west of the site with the hedge boundary to the top left of the first picture, and the view from the opposite end of the highway showing the green approach into the village. In terms of layout, the orchard is not affected by this development, so the change in street scene would not occur until you're parallel with the gable of the white building shown in the bottom image. So the white gable property is behind the tree to the left of the image, and the hedge that you can see is proposed to be translocated. So the removal of the hedge would be from about here onwards. So the left image shows the white gable property in the distance and the road frontage properties along Wales Road. The plain rendered property is the end unit you can see in the image on the right, and the left of this image is the roadside hedge of the site that's proposed to be translocated. From within the site, this slide shows a view towards the existing field gate and from within the site towards Mendip View. As you can see, the land level does rise and then falls as you head east from the entrance. The top image shows the outbuildings associated with Mendip View, and orientating clockwise, it shows the outbuildings to the left and a view to the rear of the orchard to the end of the site. So looking towards the highway from the site, the top left image, you can see the orchard and the gable of the white rendered property, which is where the main site frontage starts. Top left shows a continuation of these road frontage dwellings, and the bottom image shows a continuation of these properties, which include the listed buildings, and the corner of the site relative to Coombe Batch. So the earlier image from the public right of way can be seen above the roofs of these properties in the top two images. So the public right of way runs along this point here. Members walked this last week. So given concerns raised, the whole development was stepped back from the road frontage and reduced in scale to ensure matching ridge lines and more traditional detail relative to the properties opposite the listed buildings. Additional landscaping was proposed to give the impression of the orchard extending into the site and providing more robust boundaries. Garages were removed from the majority of the dwellings on the northern boundary to allow for some spacing in the street scene, and given concerns raised in terms of the elevated viewpoints, one of the market properties and the four self-builds are required to have a green roof. Whilst the self-builds are in outline, a condition has been proposed to set the green roof as a parameter of any detailed scheme. The 23, this is one of the market properties. It's been designed with a green roof to give a steer for the additional plots as they come forward. This is just an indicative layout for these because it's just in outline of 4 plots in this location, but it's this one that's proposing the transition. So the above slide is still missing the chimneys, so apologies for that. Chimneys have now been added. The above slide shows the Wells Road street scene with and without vegetation. So plots 1 to 3 do now incorporate chimneys, which I'll show in the next slide. The plots close to the list of buildings are more traditional in design and proportions, with a transition to include render as you go into the site. So the Conservation Officer has since confirmed that the additional information confirms the true built nature of the chimneys, which is welcomed. New chimneys will raise the ridgeline, but to an acceptable level, increasing the height is balanced by the character. The top elevations of plots 2 and 3, although they would be mirrored, so flipped effectively. And plot 1 has a large side element. These dwellings are the closest to the listed buildings in the southwest corner of the site and present more traditionally proportioned windows. So following concerns of the last committee meeting regarding detail, the agent has provided a material study relative to the properties in the surrounding area and as built on the and as proposed on the development site. So this highlights built characteristics that match that of the surrounding area through the development. Given concerns in terms of the relationship to the character of the conservation area and setting of the adjoining listed buildings, sections have been provided confirming the ridge height and due to the area of public open space, the separation distance between these dwellings. So the setback and landscaping will also soften the view of this development from the prominent entrance into the village. So this shows, just trying to find my mouse. So this is the listed buildings on the opposite side of the highway. This is the highway, this is the pavement, and this is the area of landscaping to the front, the pedestrian path, and then this is plot 1. A 3D wireframe was also provided for plots 1 to 3, showing the ridge heights of 33.48 and 33.74 on the opposite side of the highway, and 32.81 to 33.69 for plots 1 to 3. So they've managed to achieve this lower ridge height because they put dormers sort of at eaves level or even within the roof space for this element. So again, the windows are sort of split through the eaves level, so they've been reduced in scale. So this is an internal view of the street scene, demonstrating the more spacious street scene with the removal of garages, and confirms that the ridge lines of the properties would stagger down with the topography of the site, as is on the front of the site. Materials are considered to be balanced throughout the site in terms of a mixture of stone, render, and slate tiles. The properties all pick up on the same palette, render stone, brick detailing, and a mix of porch types and bays and dormer detail on some of the buildings. The affordable houses, which are these ones, are considered to blend in well with the surrounding development and aren't sort of marked as any material difference between that and the market housing. In transitioning from the open market to the self-builds, to demonstrate the green roof, one of the open market properties was proposed to be flat roofed, maintaining the material palette. Given the character of the surrounding area, design concerns were raised with this unit with the applicant. Plot 23 was subsequently amended, but been amended to the above. This was considered by officers to provide a better relationship to the original and reflected a more considered approach in terms of proportions. So whilst this is contemporary in terms of the wider development, it is set back behind the orchard and would not be visible in the wider locality. Officers were satisfied that this was a good transition for the self-build development and minimised the impact of development from the elevated viewpoints. So the application was supported with a landscape and visual impact appraisal, which identified the surrounding rights of way and the location of the site, given that it falls in the Claymores, Level and Moors landscape character area. The plan also shows the surrounding public footpaths and bridleways, which allow a degree of accessibility into the main centre. So the site shows the location in more detail, with the light blue dotted line to the south being the elevated views of where the site is visible from. The LVIA presented a number of viewpoints, but ultimately concluded that the site is most visible from close proximity on Coombatch and Coombatch Lane, and from elevated ground to the south. From the lower lying ground to the north and northeast, the rise in landform from the moors and the Isle of Wedmore limits views and vegetation on field boundaries, reduces visibility of the site. From within the village, existing development screens the site from most locations. From further afield on the low-lying moors, the site becomes largely screened by trees within the landscape. Whilst there are long-distance views of the site across the moors to the north and northeast towards the Mendip Escarpment and Nylands Hill, views from these locations are so distant, the impact of the developing the site is imperceptible in the wider scene. So in terms of on-site planting, a landscape management and master plan has been provided in support of the development, which confirms the translocation of the roadside hedge to enable visibility and additional landscaping, including orchard trees to the frontage, to the southeast end of the site, and within the gardens of some of the properties. The highway edges, so plots 30, plot 1 and plot 2, and the frontages of the properties are shown to benefit of landscaping, and the northeast boundary is proposed to be reinforced with native planting. The landscape officer is satisfied with the proposal and has recommended conditions, which are recommended at the end of the report. So following concerns raised at the last committee meeting in terms of landscaping for the garden areas of plot 16 to 17, a detailed landscape plan has now been provided. As the boundary trees are to be retained, there's a need for shade-tolerant plants for these plots. These are now confirmed as a species of rich grass, wildflower, and bulb planting, which is Narcissus, alliums, etc. And the buff area is shown to be buff-coloured bound limestone gravel. There is a play space located to the front of plots 29 and 30, which would be secured through the section 106. The scale of provision is appropriate relative to the scale of the development of the site, so that accords with local policy. On impact on adjoining properties, all the development is two-storey with front-to-front separation distances ranging from 21 metres at the southeast edge, which is plot 25, to 27.5 metres to plot 1, and 23.89 metres to plot 3. Plots 3 to 6 present rear or side boundaries to Coombe Lane to the west. The back to front distance is between 25 and 28 metres, whilst the gable on plot 3 to the front elevation distance of 27 metres. Plot 3 is gable end to the boundary, but there are no windows on the gable, and permitted development is also being removed by condition to ensure that no windows are added. Mendip View is located to the north of the site, with plots 10 and 11 located with the rear gables facing the property. Both plots show approximate garden areas of 11 metres, resulting in a 19-metre separation to the single-storey extension that members would have seen on site, and a 25-metre separation from the main house. The main impact is considered due to the elevated position of plots 27 and 28 relative to Periwinkle Cottage, which I'll come on to next. So through the site visit, members queried the relationship of plots 25 to 30 due to the drop in land levels from the site. So the access plan confirms that there's a change in land levels within with the highway raising from 22.8 to 25.6 from the southeast towards the proposed access point. So land levels of the site in this location are 24.9 to 26.5, resulting in the natural ground level being 1.9 to 1.3 metres elevated from the highway. The semi-detached and terrace dwellings are shown with a finished floor level of 26.6, reducing to 25.25, resulting in the property being between 1.6 and 2 metres elevated from the road level. So the land to the front of the site for the pavement would be 2 metres in width and reduced in height to allow for the pavement parallel to the highway. The land to the front of plots 25 to 30 would then be reprofiled to enable the changes in land levels and the provision of landscaping. Plot 25 is set 21 metres from the side gable of Hangacre, and plot 28 would be set 22.5 metres from the front elevation of Periwinkle Cottage. So both of these properties would be 2 metres above the highway level due to the existing land levels and the decline of the highway to the southeast. The overall height of the buildings are shown to be 4.8 metres to eaves and 7.8 metres to the ridge. No retaining structures are proposed. Whilst this would sit higher than the properties opposite, given the separation distance and the landscaping, it's not considered by officers that this would give rise to a detrimental level of overlooking or intrusion. So revisions to the proposal have resulted in the ridgeline of the Wells Road frontage development plots 1 to 3 being reduced to ensure that it matched the adjoining listed buildings. The development was set back from the road frontage to allow for the adjacent buildings more spacious setting and the additional landscaping. The impact on heritage assets is reduced through the revisions from the original scheme and now includes an undeveloped green space along the full road frontage, with the housing set back, design changes to ensure some longer distant views towards the north are retained, and an appropriate transition from the traditional to contemporary to set a marker for the self-build plots, ensuring minimal wider impact. In terms of highway, the proposed site access plan indicates that visibility displays of 2.4 by 43 metres are achievable. As part of the development, there is a new footway along Wells Road, along the site to the frontage. Highways considered that given the lack of pedestrian infrastructure in the vicinity of the site, the proposed footway was accepted. This would release pedestrians in Coombe Lane. Local residents have raised concern regarding potential pedestrian and vehicular conflict, given the increased use of the halls at the Scout Hall down Coombe Lane. And Coombe Lane is a private road which also carries the public right-of-way AX 2750. The link was welcomed subject to a wider strategy for access. In respect of generation, the development would generate approximately 15 trips during the week, AM and PM peak hours, which equates to 1 vehicle trip every 4 minutes during the peak hour. When considering how traffic would be distributed, the traffic generated as a result of the development is unlikely to cause a severe highway safety or capacity issue. The current proposal seeks to provide a safe access and additionally an enhanced pedestrian infrastructure, including connections via the public right-of-way to the village centre. The travel plan statement was also confirmed to accord with the travel plan strategy. A number of conditions have been recommended by the highway officer and are proposed at the end of this report. Following the concerns of the last meeting regarding pedestrian accessibility, an additional plan has been provided confirming that there are pedestrian links from the site through to town. Photos were also shown of the play spaces that have been provided in the development to the north, which is shown by the blue star on this slide, and shops are shown by the triangles. And there's also a pub within walking distance on Coombe Batch, and another further pub in town. So, as previously mentioned, the Habitats Regulation Assessment has been undertaken due to the location of the site within the North Somerset Mendip Bats stack. The HRA concluded no adverse impact subject to an appropriate alternative habitat, which is a minimum of 2.5 hectares, and a landscape and ecological management plan, both of which are proposed to be secured through the Section 106 agreement. The remaining enhancements and requirements are covered by condition that include the habitat, the LEMP, a lighting design for bats, construction environment management plan, ecological enhancements in terms of swift bricks, sparrow terraces, bee bricks, hedgehog friendly fencing, and a landscape management plan. In terms of surface water drainage, the application was supported with a drainage maintenance schedule. The runoff was confirmed to be retained up to a storm event as stipulated by the Lead Local Flood Authority, and the LFA was satisfied with the additional information confirming no drainage issues on the site. Highways recommended a surface water condition to ensure surface water doesn't run off onto the public highway, and the Internal Drainage Board confirmed that the proposal now satisfies the flow and water quality objectives. PD rights are proposed to be removed for the driveways. This is to ensure that the permeable paving, which is part of the drainage maintenance and strategy is retained and wouldn't be replaced with non-porous surfaces. A condition is also being recommended in terms of full and detailed management and maintenance for the surface water drainage for the site. In terms of heating and cooling, the development is proposed to use traditional masonry construction, which has a relatively high thermal mass compared to timber or steel construction. And that helps reduce overheating risk as it absorbs heat during the day and slowly releases it during cooler nighttime hours, effectively smoothing out temperature fluctuations within the property. Within the development layout, orientation and massing has been considered to maximise useful passive solar gain. Glazing will be specified with a solar transmittance value, so G value, to strike the balance between useful solar gain in the winter and unwanted solar gain in the summertime. All dwellings are proposed to cross-ventilate to effectively purge warm air from the properties during periods of hot weather. Window opening areas will be considered and guided by Part O of building regulations. Water efficiency measures, including the use of efficient dual flush WCs, low flow showers, and taps and appropriately sized baths will be encouraged with the aim to limit the use of water during the operation of the development. The calculation results in total water consumption of 98.6 litres per person per day for the intended specification, which is below the maximum of 125 litres per person per day, which is required by building regulations. So in conclusion, members, thank you for bearing with me. The principle of development, the site is located outside of the settlement boundary, but it does adjoin it. Policy T2B does allow the release of these sites that are well related to the settlement boundary, provided that there is an identified housing need. There is a housing needs assessment that sets out the requirement for the level of development that's been provided, and that's been endorsed. The size, scale and design of the site have been amended and reduced as part of determining the application, and the landscape character has been enhanced as part of those revisions. Play space on site is compliant with policy. Impact on adjoining properties has been set out within the presentation for members to consider, and impact on heritage assets has been considered as part of the design solutions as well. Highway considerations, the highway officers are happy subject to conditions, as are ecology, surface water drainage and sustainability and renewal. So the recommendation, thank you, is for granting planning permission.
Thank you, Mr. Freeze. At this stage, do either Mr. Brinkman or Mr. Tate wish to say anything, or be there here to respond to questions? Thank you very much. Okay, so this brings us to our public question time for this application. And first, I would like to call Emma Jones, please. All the speakers today are here in person. Apart from the living room. Press the button. Yeah, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Just let us know when you're ready to start and we'll press the timer. Thank you. Thank you.
I think I'm ready for this one. Okay. I am a primary school teacher and I live in Wedmore. I live on a single income in a small terraced cottage. Through my job, I see families affected by the cost of living crisis. But this is not a development that will help anyone or anything other than a developer's bank balance. The development would mean the devastating and irreversible loss of a green field. The Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities clarifies it in this letter. The framework asks local authorities to protect and enhance valued landscapes, soils and sites of biodiversity, and to recognise the character and beauty of the countryside. Yesterday, BNG compliance became mandatory. BNG is biodiversity net gain. It makes sure that habitats for wildlife are left in a measurably better state than they were before a development. Developers must now deliver a minimum BNG of 10% and sustain this improvement for 30 years after the development. The developers have not submitted a full BNG report. There's only a scant paragraph that suggests that they want to gain their BNG, not by retaining or enhancing the biodiversity of this pristine green field, but by offsetting, or as I like to call it, greenwashing their way into planning permission. They have not outlined the way that they will sustain BNG for the next 30 years, as they are now mandatorily obliged to do. T2B has been mentioned. The Wedmore Neighbourhood Plan states that to satisfy T2B, the development must demonstrate community support and have parish council support. The neighbourhood plan also states that in its policies take precedence over the policies of Sedgemoor local plan where there is conflict, and there certainly is conflict here. The plans also propose to use the private road Coombe Lane, as mentioned, as the safe pedestrian access to the village. It is a bumpy track ending in a small kissing gate that turns into an often muddy field. Anyone in a wheelchair or pushing a pram will be forced to walk down the unpavemented road to access the village. There is therefore no safe pedestrian route in these plans. The entire plan relies on a dangerous entrance hidden behind a blind summit in a bend on the very narrow main road. The developers have said that moving a hedge will improve visibility. However, you can't see over a hill even if you move a hedge. The development also increases the flood risk to the village. A 1 acre field holds about 61,000 litres of available plant water. This field is over 2.5 acres, therefore holds approximately 150,000 litres of water. Once that field is developed, you lose the water soak. The plans show a requisitioned drain in Coombe Lane to take the surface water. This water will go directly to the lowest part of the Wedmore village. I stress that the developers have no permission to dig up this private road to access the drain. Will you ask developers to pay for future flood damage? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now call, just to say, any issues raised with any of your submissions will be taken at the end, rather than stop the flow of the speaking. So, if I'd like to call Sue Worrell, please. Again, 3 minutes, just let us know when you're ready to start.
Is it already on? Yes. Okay. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Sue Worrell, former Wedmore Parish Councillor, and have the privilege to be part of an enthusiastic team of volunteers in the 3 years it took to prepare the neighbourhood plan. At the start, 75% of the people voted to prepare a neighbourhood plan, and there was a genuine belief that this was the opportunity for local people to influence the future of their village. When asked what is the main problem in Wedmore, the answer was the lack of affordable housing for local people, demonstrating that affordable housing is both valued and wanted. Wedmore is not a NIMBY village. 25 sites were put forward by the public, including the application site, and the team visited and scored each for its suitability and sustainability. As others will explain, the application site was not selected as a preferred site due to a range of genuine planning objections. The preferred sites were put to the public and they strongly supported not allocating the application site. And when put to referendum, 85.5% of voters favoured adopting the neighbourhood plan. However, it is important to note that the neighbourhood plan allocated more housing than suggested in Sedgemoor's local plan to cover the whole period till 2032. In view of this, there was consternation in the village when the former Sedgemoor Council proceeded to permit 2 additional non-allocated sites on the basis of unmet affordable housing need. Other speakers will explain the flaw in the housing need assessment process, which fails to distinguish between aspiration need and actual intent when offered a home. Once the neighbourhood plan was in place, local people had a genuine belief that all their work would stand for something when not allocated sites were determined. As the new Somerset Council, we look to you to support local democracy in planning, which was an important element in your election manifesto. If this application is permitted, contrary to strongly expressed local views, it will destroy the hope that your new administration supports local democracy in planning. And for all these reasons above, I look for you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Well timed, thank you. Next, I'd like to call Lindsay Baker, please. Again, 3 minutes and just let us know when you're ready.
Yeah, okay, it's fine. I've been asked today to champion the voices of our community and to advocate for their best interest. This proposal has stirred significant outrage within the community, garnering over 300 objections from concerned residents. We want to maintain the essential community infrastructure, having widely embraced the vast amount of development that has taken place within the last 5 years. But it is deeply distressing that this latest proposal falls short of our vision. The fact that such a significant number of objections has been raised is a testament to the palpable sense of disapproval and anxiety that prevails within our community, and for good reason. We believe the proposed development fails to adhere to the established neighbourhood plan and does not adequately address or fulfil the criteria conveyed in policies S2 or T2B, despite the inclusion of 40% affordable homes. It must be underscored that the mere provision of affordable housing does not absolve this proposal of its shortcomings, and yet the provision of affordable housing serves as the only justification. We believe this proposal is contrary to T2B, as there is no reliable evidence demonstrating the need for any more affordable homes in Wedmore. We have asked the council and each of the housing associations who currently manage affordable homes in Wedmore how many of those residents currently in affordable homes in the village of Wedmore have previously expressed a need in a housing needs assessment. Neither were able to answer that question, and we were instead told they do not hold that information. We assert, therefore, that the 14 people who expressed a so-called need in this developer survey are the same people who expressed the need in previous surveys. They are expressing an aspiration without any intention. We don't doubt that the survey undertaken by the developers revealed the data that it claims, but we are confident that any other survey would demonstrate the same so-called need. That is not to say that this developer survey is flawed. In this particular case, we believe it's the entire housing needs assessment process that is flawed. Neither the council nor the housing associations, by their own admission, can join the information they each have up to prove the case otherwise. I believe that approval of this application poses significant detriment to the well-being and quality of life of both current and prospective residents. This oversight is utterly incongruous with some fundamental principles of sustainable and balanced community development. Policy S2 states that new housing will create attractive, safe and socially inclusive living environments integrated into communities. How can you say without doubt that future residents will be successfully integrated into the existing community, given the significant outrage from the current residents and the disdain of the neighbourhood plan? You cannot dispute that this will not assert its dominance or appear indistinguishable at the recognised heritage gateway to our village. The community stands resolute in its opposition to the proposed development, and I implore the committee to heed the impassioned objections.
Thank you. Let's call speaker number 4, Cheryl Morris, please. Minutes from when you're ready to start. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The applicant survey is based on data up to the 28th of October 2022. Since then, 4 developments of 250 new homes have sprung up in Cheddar, including affordable homes. By now, those in that survey may have already opted for one of these. Tier 2B stipulates development can only proceed if housing need is evidenced by an up-to-date assessment. Cheddar, just 4 miles away, is the nearest Tier 1 and deemed to serve its settlement, but also the wider community, including Wedmore. Its many facilities, including employment, with which Wedmore cannot compete, enable people to use the car minimally, if at all, and live more sustainably. Conversely, a house in Wedmore may be sustainable, but the lifestyle isn't. Wedmore's few services and small independent shops can't supply the village as a whole, nor compete with supermarket prices. DIY, kids' clothes, groceries, gardening goods, fuel, all have to be delivered or collected by road, adding to traffic on key tourist routes. All roads leading to Wedmore are prone to flooding, resulting in long stretches of surface water sun deep. Emergency service has called into Wedmore itself recently. So much pressure has been placed on the drainage, it cannot cope. This creates hazardous conditions for drivers and pedestrians. Doesn't the council have a duty of care not to create new developments exposing people to known hazardous situations, especially when there are safer, more sustainable options nearby? At one latter development in Cheddar, building has slowed down. They're not releasing affordable and rented homes because their private homes have yet to sell. Private homes, particularly in Wedmore, where property is expensive, are not selling as they once did, and many have been reduced for some time, including some on new developments. Where's the guarantee that won't happen here? Unable to sell the private homes to fund the affordable ones and adding to the glut. Wouldn't it be more sustainable with existing empty properties that don't sell for the council to consider converting them into affordable or rented accommodation, rather than destroy yet another green field upon which Wedmore relies so much to soak up excess water? It will be permanently despoiling a panoramic landscape to build even more private houses at a dangerous location in an area where concrete is least needed, in the hope they'll sell and eventually provide a handful of affordable homes, all creating more traffic. It hardly sounds sustainable when evidence these houses will sell is questionable, all backed up by an unreliable survey which predates extensive development nearby. Over the 3 years since this application was made, the market's changed, climate, even the environment in Wedmore has changed. To live sustainably, should we not be making better use of resources one Somerset already has?
Thank you very much. Can I call Trevor Prideaux, please? Minutes from when you'd like to start. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. The land is a greenfield site outside of the development boundary, does not fall within Wedmore Neighbourhood Plan. It's contrary to Wedmore Neighbourhood Plan Policy WED 3. This is a legal document signed by both the Parish Council and by Somerset Council, or by Sedgemoor District Council and now Somerset Council, and the committee must take this into consideration. The development is proposed at a prominent gateway to Wedmore from the east. Wedmore is an historic village, and there are several listed buildings within a conservation area just 20 metres south of the proposed land. I don't feel that the design brief has been sensitive enough to mirror the existing buildings in the conservation area, particularly the self-builds, which in their very nature are designed by self-build applicants. This development will change the character of the village at this important gateway from the east. It will also overshadow and take light away from existing gardens that overlook the land, and the likelihood that the historic hedge will be successfully translocated is very slim. There is no safe disability access to the village, despite what the developer says. The pavement that the developer proposed leads to Coombe Lane, which is a gravel track used regularly by cars going to the Scout Hut and the allotments. There is no pavement in this lane. The cross farm footpath that meets Coombe Lane has a kissing gate and then a muddy track before getting to a gravelled area. This will force the disabled and those with pushchairs and prams to use the road, which also doesn't have a continuous pavement. How is this safe for them? The application has been on this planning portal in one guise or another for over 1,300 days. It has 314 objections against it. How many people do you think there are in favour of this application? Let me tell you, just two in 3.5 years. When did it become council policy to allow speculative developers to conduct their own housing needs assessments? And I would love to know what policy number is. Please respect Wedmore's neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call Jackie Farley on behalf of Wedmore Parish Council, please? And again, 3 minutes from when you're ready to start.
The 6 recent developments in Wedmore have put strain on the infrastructure, services and employment opportunities, creating concerns for the parish council as follows. Access to the site. The site is within metres of the brow of a hill, limiting visibility for vehicles exiting. The council's closely cited SID consistently shows over 53% of vehicles exceed the speed limit. Affordable housing. The HNA prepared by Duncan Harvey in 2021 found 44 people in need. Subsequent developments in Wedmore have produced 53 affordable houses. The HNA produced on behalf of the developer found 14 more people in need, 13 of whom are not registered on homes in Somerset. Thus, they will never be allocated any of the affordable housing proposed. The development does not satisfy the need identified, 47% being for 1-bed properties. Policy T2B is flawed. Under this policy, any developer could produce a positive HNA to obtain planning permission for any development. This must be inequitable. The doctor's surgery is routinely staffed by nurses only. GP appointments are in Axbridge, over 6 miles away, a route not served by public transport. Employment opportunities are very limited, the majority of workers travelling out of the village. Conservation. Wedmore Village was granted outstanding heritage settlement status. The council is concerned by the impact of this development. The heritage report states that the site will be hugely impactful on an already fraught and wretched situation in the heart of the village. The development will alter the character of a major gateway into the village. Ecology. Somerset Council are signatories to Somerset Climate Emergency, the #1 focus being to protect what we already have. The planning at nearby Cross Farm included a condition of no artificial lighting along the eastern and southern boundaries, and the original hedges be retained and protected under habitat regulations. Allowing this development makes a mockery of these restrictions when this site is nearly adjacent. Nearly 13,000 bat passes recorded on the site included light-averse, greater and lesser horseshoe bats, which will be disturbed. The hedge along the southern boundary is an ancient hedge offering high ecological value and historic features, supporting a range of wildlife. It is classified as a UK BAP priority habitat. The proposal is to translocate this hedge. The recently translocated hedge on a site in Cheddar fared very badly, huge lengths dying, defeating the object of the exercise and making a mockery of the process. Parish Council believes by creating a neighbourhood plan, the community have had the opportunity to guide development within our neighbourhood. Given that this application contravenes the neighbourhood plan, it makes a mockery of the supposedly democratic process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Noon, could you read out Will Human's submission, please?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So this is on behalf of former Sedgemoor District Councillor for Mark and Wedmore, Will Human, who thanks us for being able to read this out today. There are a number of serious flaws with this application, and you will hear from others in detail about those that I'm not covering, such as the effects on the environment, landscape and wildlife. I want to concentrate my objection on the grounds of the application being contrary to and completely ignoring the Wedmore Neighbourhood Plan. Some of this committee and I voted in full council to endorse and enshrine the policy, the well-researched, executed and supported Wedmore local plan, neighbourhood plan, sorry. All of the sites agreed and put forward for development have been agreed planning permissions, and to date, well over the allotted target of new homes have already been built. This has already placed considerable extra strain on the local infrastructure, and those members of the committee will know only too well the pressures on the local road network, schools and medical facilities. Wedmore simply cannot accommodate yet more housing. The local housing need has already been met, and only a spuriously concocted fantasy of a survey carried out by the developer attempts to contradict this. I'm surprised that the planning officers have paid any heed to its findings. The committee should note the following: Sedgemoor Local Plan T2B compliant application meeting all the criteria in the Wedmore Neighbourhood Plan whilst providing homes for the unmet need. However, policy T2B also states sites specifically released for that purpose will be supported outside but well related to settlement boundaries only where it is demonstrated that it meets all of the following criteria. The development appropriately contributes to the local infrastructure priorities identified, for example, in neighbourhood plans or in agreement with the parish council. Clearly, this application does not meet that policy. Members, I ask you to consider very carefully what message about neighbourhood plans you want to send out to those communities who have already or are contemplating creating one. It's a simple choice between respecting and adhering to the agreed level of development between that community and the developers, or choosing to ignore the agreements which the district council voted unanimously to adopt and support. What was the point of asking the local community to agree a level of development only then to despoil and destroy beautiful greenfield and environmentally important sites that were considered and rejected by a considerable number of that community? Thank you for your time, and I sincerely hope that you will resolve to reject this application, which should never have been allowed to reach your attention in the first place.
Well done. Thank you very much. Now to a final speaker, Tony Hammock, agent for the application, please. Again, 3 minutes when you're ready to start.
Is this on?
Good
afternoon, members. My name is Tony Hammock and I'm the planning consultant for this application. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today in support of this development. I'm not going to attempt to summarise in 3 minutes what has taken the case officer, 2 committee reports and 2 site visits to detail. I'm simply going to tell you why this application delivers betterment to Wedmore and its residents now and in the future. How it has a full suite of support and or conditions from consultees and complies with the objectives of the local plan, the neighbourhood plan and the NPPF. What does it deliver? Affordable homes, a verified unmet need for affordable housing, 12 affordable homes, 40% for social rent, to reflect the needs set out in the housing needs assessment. The housing officer confirms that in addition to the independent housing needs assessment commissioned by the developer, that there are 43 applicants with a local connection on the Home Finder Somerset records. These are not the same applicants as identified on the housing needs assessment. Smaller homes, smaller bespoke homes using a palette of local traditional house types, designs and materials. Access. Safe access and connectivity to the village along a new pavement on Wells Road, linking with the public right-of-way on Coombe Lane, to be improved by the applicant and owned by the council. Additional detailed highway drawings demonstrating safe access have been submitted since the last committee meeting. Visual impact. Low impact homes on the entrance to the village, respecting heritage assets in Wells Road, set behind an existing hedging to be translocated with landscaped public open space. Respecting the heritage assets opposite the site, plans evidencing the height and distance of the proposed homes from the list of buildings has been submitted. 2 site visits have been conducted to demonstrate the minimal visual impact that the proposals will have on this location. Landscaping, public open space, a rural setting with the retention of the trees on the boundaries, delivering quality green space. Sustainability, EV charging points, air source heat pumps, solar panels if required, reducing running costs and reducing the carbon footprint. Self-build homes, 4 self-build homes with outline permission to fulfil the demand on the council self-build list. The applicant to submit a detailed application. Plot 23 illustrates an example of a contemporary design with green roofs to be conditioned. In conclusion, a policy compliant development meeting all the regulations in the local plan, neighbourhood plan and NPPF. I commend this application to members.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the public speaking time. Officers, there. Between you, would you like to address the matters that were raised?
Thank you. I'll kick off and then pass over to Nick and Carl in due course. So just a couple of the points that was raised by the speakers. Biodiversity net gain is in. It came in on Monday. It is relevant for all applications that are submitted that are a major from Monday. So anything that we've got live on our books does not have to comply with biodiversity net gain at this stage. That said, we do secure biodiversity net gain for the site through conditions, through the HRA and through the 106, as set out at the back end of the report. The agent and a couple of speakers referred to the bumpy track of Coombe Lane. There was a proposal for a contribution to upgrade Coombe Lane. I apologise, that's not in the head of terms at the end of the report. So if members are happy to add that as a head of terms to the back end of the report, there is a contribution being put forward by the developer for Coombe Lane for enhancement to that particular link. In terms of scale of affordable housing, page 88 sets out the number of bedrooms and the fact they are all social rent. That does comply with what's been put forward in terms of the housing needs assessment. The housing needs assessment was carried out independently, so it wasn't done by the local authority. It was done by a company on behalf of the developer. The rationale, how it was undertaken, what the results showed and everything like that was screened in detail by the affordable housing manager, and he was happy with the outcome and recommendation. So we are relying on the HMA as updated from 2022 being the up-to-date housing needs assessment for Wedmore. The reason it needs to be up to date is we say if it's more than 3 years old, it's probably out of date and the need is probably increased if it's older than 3 years. So the fact it's back end of 2022 means it's as up to date as it can be. There were quite a few questions about drainage and flood risk. Within the surface water drainage slide, I did cover that the drainage bodies are all satisfied. The greenfield runoff rates are maintained for this site. So even though they are building on the site, they are retaining water within the site and then letting it run off of site at greenfield rates. That's a requirement through the LFA and the IDB. There's also a condition, the condition 20 and 27 cover that requirement, and one of them relates to surface water drainage going onto the highway, where there was questions about localised highway flooding. The requirements for any application site are to mitigate their own impacts. So as long as we ensure that this development doesn't increase surface water flooding on the highway, it isn't responsible for mitigating existing problems on the highway in terms of housing need. There was a reference about slowdown of market sales. That probably is the case, cost of living crisis. But this development is being proposed and put forward by a developer, the development that's in front of members. It does include affordable housing, which does include affordable rent, which is effectively 50% market value for rent properties. So we wouldn't or couldn't, as a local authority, buy open market housing at open market housing rates and offer it as affordable housing rent because we don't have the budget. And there was mention about, sorry, I think T2B and S2. I have gone through T2B as part of the presentation, so I wasn't going to go over that again unless members have questions later. But if I can pass on to Nick on some of the H&A questions, thank you, and then on to Carl for highways and drainage.
Thank you. Yeah, there's obviously been quite a lot of discussion around, in particular, the relationship of the adopted local plan and the neighbourhood plan. I think the important consideration is both of those documents form a development plan. So it's not neighbourhood plan, it's not the local plan, it's both in combination. Important in terms of there's some suggestion about flaws in policy T2B. Whether that is or isn't the case, obviously T2B went through extensive public inquiry and was an examiner made various modifications and was adopted as such. And it is a fact that in theory, it enables development to come forward, to keep coming forward outside of settlement boundaries if there is unidentified housing need. The neighbour plan policies, it's just sort of gone off, but in terms of the its affordable housing policy, it actually cross-references to T2B in the sense that, to ensure that it was compliant with the adopted neighbour plan at the same time. So it has the same allowance if there is affordable housing need demonstrated through an up-to-date housing needs assessment. Then the considerations of T2B are what that policy, what that proposal will be judged against. Fundamentally, therefore, this does hinge on the, I suppose, the legitimacy of the housing needs assessment, and we've heard some assertions that there may be flaws in that. No actual evidence of that. I would say the housing needs assessment was, as has been mentioned, was extensively reviewed by our housing development manager. There was references about whether we would just accept housing needs surveys presented or commissioned by developers. That's certainly not the case, and we have examples elsewhere where we have not accepted a housing needs survey presented by a developer, and in fact that was one of the reasons for refusal. So we look at these things extremely closely. The clear thing is a housing needs assessment is only going to be a snapshot at that time, and even 8 weeks, 8 months, 2 years later, the situation will have changed to a degree. We have to go on with the findings that were presented at that time. From my many years in planning policy and dealing with affordable housing schemes, I would be absolutely amazed, and I think it would be a first if Wedmore was a village that no longer had any local housing need. We're aware of housing prices. We're aware of the cost of living crisis. Need is only getting greater, which is why this scheme, which is delivering smaller units, consistent with what the neighbour plan requires, and for social rent, provides opportunities for those, most in need in terms of housing. In terms of the presentation, we have gone through all of the criteria of T2B in terms of our broad compliance. There was reference to schemes needing local and parish council support. That's not quite true. What that's specifically in terms of the affordable housing element, it talks about robust and meaningful consultation and addressing issues that have been raised. Clearly, people will have different views as to whether the issues raised have been addressed, but the presentation clearly showed how the scheme has gone through considerable change to try and meet those most matters that have been raised. And I think there can be no doubt that there's been a significant amount of consultation. That's demonstrated by the number of people who commented on the application and all of the consultation responses on the website. So it's certainly met that. It's not a requirement that it has the support of the parish council. That is a different element of T2B where you're not providing affordable housing. So just to clarify that, because perhaps there's a slight confusion because the policy allows for exceptionally to deliver schemes that don't have affordable housing. That's not the element we need to consider now. I think probably we sort of picked up on most of the general points, but obviously when there's more specific questions, we'll come back.
Thank you. If I just clarify the use of Coombe Lane, presumably the vehicles using it at the moment have vehicular rights to do so, and the owner of the lane has allowed them to do that. The public right of way, it is a footpath. It's a designated adopted footpath, and it's maintained, or certainly it sits within the remit of the council in terms of its public rights of way section. So that will be, there's proposals to contribute to an upgrade of that. The works would be subject to a 278 agreement, which would also cover the frontage works and the footway works. So you'd have a overarching legal agreement which would deal with the implementation of those works to get them in place before any parts of the site were occupied, so that we were able to, so that there was a safe and suitable access for all the residents of the new properties. Drainage issues were raised. Again, the developer's proposing internal drainage arrangements. Those would be the subject of a section 38 agreement if that was the wish of the developer to go down that particular route. The roads could remain private internally. There's no strict requirement for them to be adopted, but ideally they would be adopted under a 38 agreement, and the drainage situation would be examined by the authority at that time to make sure that the legal agreement, obviously we didn't sort of end up with any kind of sort of severe or expensive maintenance liabilities. There was a comment about speeding vehicles. When looking at planning applications, we have to look at this posted speed limit, which is 30 miles an hour. The developers propose displays which are in excess of that speed of traffic, and therefore are acceptable to the highway authority. The junction itself will be designed, detailed design through like I said, through a section 278 agreement, should consent be granted, of course. And that detailed design process will include safety audits. It will look at street lighting, signs, lines, all those sorts of things, and it will create a junction that will be considered to be safe and suitable for the use of that particular development. And as I said, we would try and get that in place. We would suggest that that be in there prior to commencement of works of any dwelling, certainly prior to any occupations. I think those were the main issues I think that were raised from highways.
Thank you. There were also some questions raised about the translocation of the hedge and local GP services, and the fact of Wedmore being having outstanding heritage centres.
Thank you. In terms of translocation of the hedge, it is true, sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't work well and the hedge fails, the replacement hedge will be subject to the landscaping condition that's recommended at the end of the report. We are going for translocation in the first instance because we are trying to maintain the existing landscaping on site. But, you know, members should be aware translocation doesn't always work. It does occasionally fail. It wouldn't mean that you don't have a hedge. It just means you'd be starting from scratch in the event that it fails, but it is covered through the landscaping condition. Sorry, the second one was the GP surgery. In fact, it's mainly manned by nurses. The doctors, as I understand, are in Axbridge. There is still an NHS sort of element within the village, albeit not GP. Unfortunately, we can't dictate sort of doctors servicing certain villages. That service was there, which meant it was part of the Tier 2 settlement. All the statuses of the settlements will be re-reviewed as part of the local plan review, but it's not something we can reassess at this point. And third and final point, apologies, was the heritage statement. I think actually it is reflected in the design that's come forward before members. You know, members have seen a lot of large developments around the north Somerset area. And, you know, the scale and character and detail and materials that have gone into this scheme have actually evolved during the application process, and elements have been added, the scale has been reduced. So I think my opinion as the officer is that they are reflecting the sort of heritage value and character of the surrounding village, but obviously that's a matter for members to debate and consider. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I think I'll just summarise the site visit that took place on last Friday morning. Councillors Filmer, Grimes, Bradford, Hendry and myself visited the site. We went to the top of Mill Lane and had a good look at looking down on the site. And we also walked the site and we looked from the roadside as well. I would like to say, as a site visit, it's really important that we don't actually speak to anybody else. It's an opportunity for members to look sort of objectively and quietly and reflectively at the application and the site. So I would like to apologise. There was a resident who wanted to speak to us. I hope we didn't appear rude, but it's just there are really strict rules about the fact of us coming to this committee with a clear and impartial mind, and we cannot dispose ourselves, predetermine ourselves, sorry, before we sit at this committee today. This is a day where we have the debate and we listen to you. So there are the two question that's arising for me from the site visit was about the height of the land on the, looking at the slide here from the right hand side, it is higher than the other end, and it was just, could you sort of go over again how that is being dealt with? But otherwise I'll wait till the main debate before any other questions. Thank you. And if other councillors, I'll go through one by one for their observations. Thanks. So Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you. As you say, I mean, we looked at the site from the various locations. Certainly the view from the footpath that we came down from the top of the ridge, it does show the prominence of this site in the landscape, and particularly I think it made it clear as to the raised nature of it in comparison with the surrounding land, which again you made reference to. We came back down, had a look along the highway, and certainly the access. We also had in front of us there some mock-up, but some illustrations to what the site could look like in terms of things like the pavement across the front of the site, which again raised some questions in my mind in terms of if you're having that width of pavement, the bank of the level of the land is very close to the current edge of the road where the mature hedge is, and like how that works, setting it back a further 2 meters and the gradient. And it'll be interesting to hear from highways as well how that works with the highways access, because certainly when we stood on the site, difference of levels between the road and the land that we were stood on was considerable, and I'm not quite sure how that actually works in terms of the site coming forward. Also in terms of access, it's been mentioned by other speakers, the proximity to the brow of the hill, and would certainly appreciate some views of highways in terms of the satisfaction with that location in terms of being able to see traffic as it approaches when you're sat in the low level of a car. Finally, from me, once we were on the site, again, as you mentioned, Chair, the height again and how that works for those properties to the front of the site in relation to the conservation area. As has been mentioned, it's been partially addressed by building the windows into the roof, so that you've got those sort of dormer effect. But bearing in mind, we seem to be starting higher than we are opposite, and building properties these days are bigger than cottages were when they were built originally, and yet the ridge height is going to be similar. I'm struggling to see how that works. Again, we'll be looking for reassurances on those, but I will keep my mind open for the rest of the debate and we'll factor in the other comments.
Thank you. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I do agree with the comments of my fellow councillor. I thought it was a very thorough site visit, and all possible positions to view the site were taken to give a view from the whole site from all angles. But I'll wait and see how the rest of the debate goes. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The same views can be echoed in the street, really. When you're at the top of a hill, you can see everything. You look right down on everything, and that's the place to be, wet well up top of the hill. Right? Now, a lot of things have been mentioned this morning that were obvious to see on that site visit. We've got two parties that are really loggerheading each other to try and get things done. Everybody's bending over backwards from each side to try and solve, which is a very difficult thing, I think. And looking at the site, walk around this morning, and the access onto the Wales Road, not particularly good. I didn't think, and how that could be improved. It probably can't be. The speed limits are really hollow. And as for the hedge and reclaiming, etc., well, if the weather is right and everybody does their job right, that's okay. But there's only certain soils you can do that on, and I'm not so sure Wedmore is one of them. I'll wait to hear the debate, Madam Chairman, and I'll come back in with some further chat later on.
Thank you, Councillor Bradford. And finally, Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. The site visit last year was informative, very good. However, the one last week was absolutely first class because we spent much more time there, looked around it and learned a lot more. One of the points out from Councillor Filmer about the height difference from the site down to the main road is actually considerable, which we didn't see until the site visit last week. There are a few points I'd like to take up with highways, but we can do that shortly anyway once the debate started properly. In fact, everything else I can bring up. One of the main points, just I can see right now, is the children's play area should be a leap on the laptop, should be screened off. I can't see any screening on the drawings or the maps we've got. But again, we can pick up in a bit once everybody starts talking properly. But yes, all in all, first class site visit and well worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we start the debate for all members, would officers like to respond to some of the points made from the site visit, please?
Yes, certainly. So the change in levels, it was covered in the presentation, but I'll go back through just so that members have got it. In terms of the relationships of plots 1 and 3, so this was the separation distances as shown, and then you've got the ridge heights of the properties on the opposite side of the road and the ridge heights of plot 1. So they are level, and there was sort of this wireframe model also undertaken in terms of the ridge heights of plots 3, 1 and 2 relative to the list of buildings at the top end of the site. I think from the site visit, what was clear, apologies, I'm just going back to the earlier slides now, is that the land levels actually step up. So Wells Road here is at a much lower level than this corner of the site. As the highway increases, it sort of levels out with the sort of site access level. So at this point, there's much less of a difference between the highway here and the highway here. So there is a difference of, and I did set it out in the report, but it's somewhere between 1.6 and 1.9 metres in terms of, sort of, it's mainly this semi-detached property in this terrace here in terms of the main impacts. This is level to the buildings opposite. So in terms of scale, land difference and impact on neighbours, I think this is also because of the smaller nature of these ones with the windows up in the eaves, as discussed. These ones are all 2-storey properties, the heights of which I did read out as part of the presentation. Let me just see if I can find it again. So in terms of impact on the neighbouring properties, so this slide was shown to demonstrate it. So this is the semi-detached property and the terrace. The terrace does step down in height with the change in levels stepping down in this direction, but notwithstanding that, the height of this level of land is still sort of 1.6 to 2 metres higher than the road level. As part of the application, so I don't know if members can just about see there's a wavy line that's like the edge of a cloud along here, and again wavy line along here. That's the location of the current hedge. This solid bit here, this is the 2 metre pavement. So where the location of the hedge is, what members would have seen on site is it does slope down quite significantly on the hedge, and the hedge is about halfway up it. The intention would be to pull the hedge up, push it back 2 metres and flatten that bit so it's just pavement height relative to the highway. So that bit of the land will be lower than what it currently is. And the agent has confirmed what they would then do is retaper the land set back from that, so you get to existing land levels for these properties. In terms of the impact on the neighbouring properties, this is something I discussed within the report. So the gable end of the property here, this is one of the properties potentially impacted on. There's a gable end, there's a secondary window on the gable, but given sort of the position, the orientation and the distance in terms of separation, it's not considered as a significant impact on that neighbour. It is an increase, though, it is the properties being built on the existing land levels in that location. The area of impact that I did look at in a lot of detail, just trying to find my mouse again, is the property just down here. You can see this property, this is Periwinkle Cottage. So that property does actually front onto the highway at the moment. So what they get at the moment is they front onto the highway, there's the width of the highway and then a high hedge and then views of green open space behind it. What they will get is they will front onto the highway, there'll be a 2 metre wide pavement, then the land will start to taper up and the hedge will be translocated if it survives. If not, it will be replanted as part of the development. And these properties immediately opposite are about 2 metres higher in land level. So the height of the property to eaves is 5 metres, something increasing to sort of about 7.5. So that will sort of appear as sort of 7 metres relative to that property or 9 metres to the ridge. But the ridge obviously does go away from the property. Given the distances, as an officer, I'm comfortable that that relationship isn't a reason for refusal. But if members want to consider the impacts and if they balance it differently, that's down to members. But that's the key impact, I think, in terms of impact to neighbours is this property down here and the potential impact on their front windows. With regards to the LAP, sorry, just come back to Councillor Hendry's point, it's secured as part of the 106, so we haven't got a plan showing the full details of it, but as a small local area of play designed for toddlers, they do tend to have fencing sort of all the way around to make sure the toddlers don't escape. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Is there anything you wish to pick up there from a highways perspective?
Yes, obviously we've got a detailed design stage to go through for the actual junction, so there is, you know, some way to go, but what we've got in front of us is drawings which we would describe as generally in accordance with. These drawings are acceptable for to be included in a legal agreement, so if you grant planning consent and that agreement would then, so that plan would then find its way into the section 278 agreement and then be subject to a further detailed design, which would include drainage and gradients and levels. You know, if you look at the footway at the frontage, normally there's a 100 mil curve on the front and there's a 1 in 20 fall. So the back of the footway is going to be slightly higher than the front. So there is going to be a difference in level there. How that is dealt with on site really is a matter of development, because there'll be some haunching holding up at the curve, if you like, at the back of the footway. And then there will be a public open space on either side, which will be maintained by the developer. So that construction will be dealt with at the detailed design stage. But it can be dealt with. It's technically possible to deal with the change in level through either that regrading or might be very small retaining structures that would be retaining the public open space rather than the highway. So that would be a private wall or a private area that would be maintained under the management company arrangements. So overall, and also just to point out that the 278 agreement would probably go to, see where it says road 1 on the right hand side of that plan over there. That would be the limit, where the R is, that would be the limit of the 278 works. So those works would be covered by the initial agreement. The 38 agreement, if the developer chose to go down that route, would then extend into the site and then down to the right and left, down towards the self-build units. Self-build units probably would stay private because adopting areas, it's difficult to have a legal agreement with an individual. So they tend to stay private mostly, but we still have the main drag of the estate road would be adoptable in theory. It's being designed for a 11.4 metre refuse vehicle backed in and out so they can get in, which means that a fire engine can get in safely. So overall, I think the design meets that. Where the development sits in terms of the Red Book estate road guidance, it could be an access street or it could be a collector road. It really would depend on the actual detailed submissions as and when they come in, as it should consent be granted, of course. We don't enter into legal agreements until consent's granted, because obviously officer time would be wasted on that if permission is not granted by the LPA. So it's a sort of chicken and egg situation. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much. Members, I'll open it up for debate now. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. I'm a little bit confused with all this, to be honest. I didn't manage to get to any of the, I wasn't on this committee at the time of the early visit last year. and I didn't manage to get, I didn't know it was on Friday. I wasn't aware of it. And so I apologize if it was on the list of emails or whatever, but I didn't know. But but the result was I was unable to attend. And so I'm a little worried about the comments made about the field containing water and the field having different levels. And I was very interested to hear that people say things like, well, it slopes down that way and it slopes down that way. And I think this, to me, it's like something completely wrong. You know, and there's quite a different height, but I can't see the heights because there isn't a drawing that shows me the heights. It shows me the actual, there isn't an isometric drawing. If you could produce an isometric, I'm sorry if I'm using a word that's, it's an isometric drawing is one that shows you 3D, what that is about. I'd like to see this 3D because I have a feeling there's something not quite acceptable in the way that you're speaking to me about the house down here being low and the house down here being, when we walked down the field, we could see the whole lot. It was 2 meters high at the back. And I'm thinking, I am confused. So because I'm confused, I'm asking for clarity. Is there such a thing as an isometric drawing of how that field will look? If there isn't, I'm sorry, I'm unable to comment further on the thing. It's, to me, that's where the whole nub of the thing lies.
Thank you. In terms of the plan that's up for members at the moment, this plan does give that detail in a technical way that gets translated by officers. So in terms of this plan,
verbally,
yeah. So this gives the set ordnance datum levels. So the levels that you can see in grey, they are the level of the highway, and the level you can see grey in the area to the front of the dwellings. Again, that's the level of that bit of land. So from this plan, we can tell what the height difference is relative to the highway, relative to the finished floor levels of the properties. We've got scale drawings of the properties. So we take that information, we consult all the statutory consultees, including drainage, including landscaping, including the highways authorities, and say, does this work? So in terms of the information, we do have it. We don't have it in the graphic that you're requesting in terms of a side elevation showing the slope of this particular bit. We did have it for plots 1 to 3, because plots 1 to 3 were considered to be more sensitive given the proximity to the listed buildings and the conservation areas. So that's an additional level of detail that isn't a requirement for the planning application, but for members and for clarity in terms of the impact on the heritage element of the site, we got that information in the wire graphic for plots 1 to 3 I showed earlier in the scheme. And in terms of street scenes, we also do have street scenes. So that's, I think you're probably after that for the back end of the site. So that confirms the ridge heights of the properties opposite. That confirms the ridge heights of plot 1 to 3. We don't have that information in that format for the rest of the site. What we do have is the street scene, which is this one. So this shows, we take the top one because it hasn't got the landscaping to the front. So this is plot 1, plot 2, plot 1, plot 2, plot 3. The ridge heights of the listed buildings are comparable to these units at this point. This is where the access is into the site. And then it's these units and the height difference of these units relative to the highway. So these units, the finished floor level of these units are sitting sort of 1.6 to 2 meters above the highway at a distance of over 20 meters.
Thank you. Councillor Hendry.
Thank you, Chair. On the subject of the heights of the buildings and the layout and the slope, I'm actually okay with that because that's the lay of the land, that's just the way it is. And as far as I can see, that's actually acceptable, absolutely fine. A couple of points, just like to speak to highways. The exit and entry onto Weld Road, the display, as we have, could actually do on the left-hand side of going quite wider, probably than 6 meters. If there's anybody exiting the site to go across the road and turn right to Wedmore, I've got a very tight view of the left-hand side, so anyway, that's just my point, that's the way I looked at that. Because of the height difference of this site and down onto Mills Road, which is some considerable drop. So I think that could be looked at. Ecology, well, that's been spoken about at some length. Last year, in this room, I was on that committee and I spoke at some length about it, so I'm not going to drag over all this again. Coombe Lane, I didn't realise until somebody mentioned that the developer was quite happy to do something with that. By that I mean to actually level it out or something like that. Now, so that's not a bad. Because we were there on site for about 2 hours last week, I took particular note that only one vehicle in the 2 hours went down there, and that was a local resident covered down by the scout huts, I think, on the right hand side. So there was only one vehicle in 2 hours. There was, when I first arrived there, on site about 10 o'clock in the morning, there was about 3 or 4 residents with dogs who I spoke to and walked off down the lane. Beyond that, there was nobody, nothing at all. So the lane is not as busy as some people think about. It's not at all, because there's one vehicle and about 3 people in 2 hours. Flood risk really is not such a problem because the field it's not been changed. The slope still goes the way it is even in this present day. So and because of the height of the original field at the top, I just don't see that at all. There's one more thing to highways as well, apart from the actual splay in the road. I'm not quite sure how you're clarifying this about the 4 self-built houses at the bottom. Will the road be finished by the developer at the bottom like the process, and if so, will be adopted? Because I'm not quite sure there's quite a lot of talk about that. I'm not really clear about that, but will be adopted and will be finished by the developer. Thank you for the moment, Chair. Thank you.
I start with the low cost housing. Like I said, the most residential sites are covered by Section 38 agreement under the Highways Act. And sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, so most sites are covered by Section 38 agreement. That looks at all those issues. Like I said, the trouble with self-build units is they get broken up and sold off individually, and it's very difficult to have a legal agreement with one individual and then obviously having to involve others. So it's just complicated in terms of how that process works. It can be done, not impossible. The developer they don't need to provide an access to the properties or, well, self-build by themselves. That it's the timing in the implementation of those as to, if someone was building the end house first, they obviously they would want to try and secure that. They would have access rights. Normally the road belongs to one individual and then the others have rights of access over it. That's what normally happens on a private drive. It could be adopted if necessary. We could look at it. It's not ruling it out. It's just not normal for that to happen. Most of them normally stay private. The other issue, I believe, was the design of to the left, the junction as you come out to the left, looking sort of back towards Wells. Like I said, there will be changes to that drawing. It will be tweaked. It will be there'll be a detailed design process that will kick in should planning consent be granted, and it will look at how that junction works, whether there's any minor widening of the Wells Road to move the curb line back, or there wouldn't be any narrowing. That's for certain. But all of this takes place as part of the detailed design process. Most of the displays are actually in the actual footpath area. So there's no maintenance wise, it's actually quite an easy one to look after for the developer or the management company. 99% of the display is over the footpath. And the vertical curve, what they've done, Hydrock did some detailed work on the design of the junction, and they looked at the difference in levels and compared that against the road coming out of the site. And the way they've designed it is that the displays still work despite the difference in levels. So they've provided some chainage drawings. There's a long section, and it shows that the displays pass over the areas they need to pass over. So they can be provided. They will be provided by the development.
Can you return to the slide that shows it was from the top of the hill from our site visit on Friday, because whilst this site is outside of the development boundary, it's not actually at the end of development or buildings along that road. And just for the benefit of members that weren't there on Friday, I think it's useful to return to that slide.
Yeah, so I'm starting at the back and working my way through it in the wrong direction now. So this is the bottom end of the site. When I undertook the site visit in the middle of the summer, you can't see these properties from this public right of way in the summer because the trees are in leaf. But outside of season, clearly this is the looser form of development that's at the bottom of the site, including there's a nursery building here. We were originally trying to encourage the developer to connect straight through to the nursery building. The nursery building didn't want a connection onto their site, so that's why they couldn't connect that way. This triangle here is the bottom end of the site, so this is where the self-build element is proposed to be. In this section is the orchard to the front, and you can just about see the highway sort of here. So that's the bottom end of the site. Apologies. So bottom end of the site, middle section of the site. So again, this long thin bit behind the orchard carries on up here. The extent of development for the detailed application goes up to this point here. So these are outbuildings associated with the neighbouring building. That's where the extent of the development is going at the moment. The green roofed property is proposed to go here, and then the self-build units would be further down here. The self-build are in outline, so we'd have further applications in passing time by individuals that are required to be part of the design process for those units. This is the cream gabled property, which is opposite but slightly diagonal from the end of terrace. So the end of terrace is going there. Then the semi-detached property and the vehicular access into the site is in this gap here. And going up to the next slide. So again, this is looking at the sort of character of development that's already the road frontage. This is the gap where the vehicular access is going. And then this is the property that I highlighted earlier. So that's Periwinkle Cottage, and that's the gable end of the other unit. So again, this is the edge here of the road frontage bit. The development set back between 20 to 22.5 metres from these properties, but is proposed to be constructed at this level, which is the same level as this property to the back here. But obviously that the impact feels slightly less from that one because of the distance set back. This is one of the recent developments in the area, so that's Strongbox. As you can see, so there's a solid built form of development across this edge, and we would argue here that you can see from the elevated footpath. This time of year, you can also see the loose knit development to the bottom of the site. In the summer, you can't, but from the footpath, there is a field that there's a boundary hedge that divides this field from the adjoining field. Once you're in the adjoining field, you cannot see this site. You only see the loose knit development towards the bottom. So this is the most severe impact. And then the previous slide, maps again. So this was the objectors photo, because they didn't consider our photo to be clear enough. But this is the photo that we took. This is in the middle of the summer. So in the middle of the summer, you can see this is the gable end property. So that's the edge, the front bit. The development's mainly in this area here, sitting, we would argue, as part of that development pattern. The outbuildings carry on down to about here, which is where the extent of the development will be in the self-build units, up close further down here. So as you can see, there's a lot more greenery in the middle of the summer that does limit views of the loose knit development slightly further down, but we would argue that it sort of fills in nicely in terms of the scale of the development, and with the green roof for the element of this bit would inform sort of the self-build units coming forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In the last 4 or 5 years, there's a lot of villages have gone from tier 4 to tier 2 garden development. Obviously, Cheddar have had an awful lot. North Petherton have had an awful lot. And Wedmore have had quite a lot. And I feel whatever we do at the moment, people are digging their heels in, they've had enough. I noticed in North Heather, we've got a couple of developments planned and people are really digging their heels in this, and really objecting in a big sort of a way. And I feel the same in Wedmore. It's unfortunate sometimes that, the neighborhood plans clash with the needs. And the needs are a bit out of date, but I feel sure if it was done now with the housing situation like it is, then these houses would be required. As a planning committee, we've got very, very difficult decisions to make sometimes, and we could probably sit here until the cows come home. We probably wouldn't get it right, and we're going to offend somebody, somewhere or another on the line. So it's a matter of listening and trying to balance it all up. I'm not particularly happy about the road frontage and the hedges and all the rest of it, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't do justice to the area. I'm just going to wait and see what happens, because it is a very difficult one. And when they done the neighborhood plan, this was number 9 out of 11. So there's better sites than this about in Wedmore, even though they're considered 3 have already been built on. You see what I'm saying? So there's others looming that could be used instead of this one. So I'm scratching my head a bit. We've been talking now for 2 hours on this, 2 hours on this one, and I'm not a lot clearer, I'll be perfectly honest.
That's the film.
I have the surplusism to Councillor Brentford, because having looked at what's come forward as a plan from the applicant, they've made an awful lot of effort to try and address a lot of the issues that have been put forward, and certainly the design and layout is an awful lot better than it was. Where I'm still struggling is whether it's the right location for the development. As you look at that scene there, one of the issues that we saw on the site visit, and again you can see from the pictures, it is on significantly rising land. It is above the surrounding area, so anything that goes on there is by its definition going to be prominent. In terms of the current character of that area, it is very much a transitional area where you are leaving the more built-up area of Wedmore and heading into the countryside. And I think the officer in part of the presentation said it fills in, and unfortunately it does. It fills in that gap, and for me, it transforms that character of that area from being a transitional rural area into a much more urban. It's outside the boundary. I know we've looked at the WED policies and we've looked at our affordable housing policies. Where I'm finding it difficult is I generally will try and support affordable housing wherever I can in the rural areas and have done in my own patch. I just struggle with this site because of its prominence and the impact it potentially has on the character. And I'm still waiting to be convinced. There are a number of other members I know who haven't spoken yet, so I'll be interested to hear what they say.
Are there any, Councillor Bruce?
Thank you. I'd just like to apologise first of all because due to work commitments I couldn't attend the site visit, which would have been more helpful. I'd like to understand whether we actually have the fact that there may be other sites that would be more suitable for the development. Does that constitute grounds for refusing the application legally?
If we were looking, if members were concerned about the location of this site, they need to identify planning harm as a result of this site, or something in this site, in this development, that conflicts with the adopted policies that you would sustain a refusal on its own right. The T2B policy does release edge of settlement sites, but this is the site that's being promoted at the moment. This is the site in front of members. So there isn't an alternative at the moment in front of members. So if this site was not desirable, I would need sort of planning reasons as to what concerns with this site would be in terms of not supporting it. The fact there could be an alternative site somewhere else isn't in itself a reason for refusal. But if you can identify specific harm as a result of developing this site, then that would be a reason for refusal.
Thank you. Any other members? If there are no other comments or questions, I am now looking for a proposal. And it's just a reminder, as has been said, if members are minded to refuse, it needs to be on policy, related to policy. Oh, Mr. Tate.
Just thought it was useful, there was a little bit of discussion around the relative scale of development of the tier 2 settlements, and it's very clear that we were appreciative of the constraints of Wedmore. Wedmore was one of the lower numbers in terms of minimum levels of growth, and I emphasised the local plan talks about minimum levels of growth, but Axbridge had 74, Netherstowe 75, Wedmore was 116, but if you compare that, there are 6 tier 2 settlements, other tier 2 settlements, 163, 225, almost double the level of growth. So it did reflect, the levels of growth that come forward did reflect a lot of those constraints. And if it was previously mentioned about the historic nature of Wedmore, and it's no surprise through our sustainability assessment that Axbridge, Netherstowe and Wedmore, because of the historic constraints as well, that was one of the reasons why they had lower levels of growth than the other tier 2 settlements. And just touching on, other opportunities, the important thing is we only have this opportunity to consider. So this is the only site that could deliver the 12 needed affordable homes for people with a local connection to Wedmore. But in terms of opportunities, when we also obviously did a site assessment, it would have been very similar actually to the neighbourhood plan assessment. Sites to the north ruled out rising ground, access issues. Sites to the west, 2 sites to come forward in that location. They were quite difficult and controversial at the time, proximity and impact on the conservation area, but there has been some development on the west. And I've been around long enough to know there was quite a lot of concern about the, I think the Holdenhurst development, which was to the sort of northeast. That's quite a small step, but because again, the impact on the landscape and that being very much the edge of the settlement, I'm not aware of any sites in our strategic housing land availability in terms of opportunity to the south. Again, you're getting into very high rising ground. So, there are very limited further opportunities, and none of them are going to be sites which have a lot of green against them. They will all have, some positive aspects, some aspects which need addressing, and some impact. So it's always going to be a balanced judgment, but there are not alternative sites on the edge or immediately outside of the settlement which we're aware of that could potentially meet the identified affordable housing need.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. I am still looking for a recommendation, but there are no other questions. Councillor Grimes.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say, I've listened to this for over a couple of hours. We've all spoke on it. I don't like this application. I think it is in the wrong place. I mean, one of my main reasons is the rise and fall in the land. And the problem that we've got, as I see as a committee, is that it looks all very well on paper, but when you see it in reality and it's built, it looks totally different. I've worked on these sites on a lot of developments, and this is one of the issues that we've got. I don't like this application, but after saying that, I can't think of an actual planning reason at this stage to vote against it. And that's, I think, is my dilemma. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but that's the position I'm in at this stage.
Any further comments? Any recommendations? If there are no, I will make a recommendation in the absence of anyone else. In view of the fact, we have to accept the housing needs assessments will provide affordable housing to local people. I believe the layout of the design will minimise the impact of the way it's set back. So I will be proposing to grant permission with the additional heads of terms regarding the contribution for Coombe Lane by the developer. But is there a seconder? If there is, thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour, please show.
So 1, 2, for the development,
All those against, please show.
And again, over. 1, 2, 3, 4 again.
And abstentions.
1, 2, 3, 4 abstentions.
Okay, in that case,
It's
that's failed.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for another recommendation based on policy grounds. Councillor Filmer.
I think where we are is the same. My concern with this is the impact on the setting of that section. I think the development would have an unacceptable impact on the street scene and the character of that area. Because of that, I think it would be unacceptable as is proposed at the moment. It particularly because of the nature of the transitional nature of the entrance to the village. I think it's on the design of the impact on the character, which would feel a reason for saying we cannot support it. I understand there are other issues that we have concerns about, but I don't think would meet the criteria of being defendable. But I think the impact on the setting and the character of that area of Wedmore would be unacceptable. On that basis, I'll move refusal.
Thank you. Just before we proceed, in terms of policy grounds, are you satisfied or do we need more detail?
I'm happy that he's provided sufficient information for us to understand what the reason for refusal is. Based on that, we've got impact of the street scene, character and setting, given the transitional nature of this site from sort of a semi-rural location and the impact of the built form on the front. So with that in mind, I think we're looking at policy conflicts with policy D2 and D26, which is design and historic character. I will take some further advice in terms of Wedmore neighbourhood plan policies and some of design conflicts as well.
Emphasize again, it's because of if the level, well, because that's where it's the raised nature of the land that has the greater impact. If it was on the, if we were talking about it all on the flat, I think you would have a lot less impact than something that's already starting from a level that's higher. That's why it has that greater impact.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation to refuse. Is there a seconder? Councillor Grimes.
Yes, I believe that that's correct, and I'm happy to second that.
So the proposal to refuse has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favour.
And all those against, please show.
2 against, that's 9 members.
And abstentions.
And 1 abstention.
And 1 abstention. So permission is refused.
Can I just confirm the wording for the reason for refusal is to be agreed with the chair and councillor Filmer?
You've got reason for, sorry. We've heard the reason for refusal, John. I think the only caveat was that you wanted to check the neighbourhood plan.
Yeah.
And I'm happy, the members are happy that that is delegated to be agreed between the officer in conjunction with the the chair and vice chair. Thank you.
And proposal. And the proposal.
Absolutely, I think I do.
Thank you. Okay, so we will now take a 5-minute comfort break to allow any members of the public who may wish to leave before we go on to the next application. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I apologise to members of the public. We have to take a little break after that marathon application, but we will press straight ahead with agenda item number 7 on page 101, and that is the habitat regulation assessment to agree. Mr. Noon, are you taking us through this one? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. The proposal here relates to the erection of an agricultural workers dwelling at Higher Halsey Cross Farm. My presentation is in 2 parts. Firstly, because of the relationship with protected habitats, the Exmoor and Quantocks Back Conservation Area, we've had to do a habitats regulations assessment. That is the first part of my presentation. That asks you effectively to acknowledge the conclusions of the habitat assessment, and then we move on to the applications. So in relation to that habitats regulations assessment, we have a proposal for the erection of a single dwelling to serve as an agricultural workers dwelling to meet the needs of the farm. The yellow dot there shows the location of the proposed dwelling, and the farm is the cluster of buildings immediately to the east. And just to get bearings, that is Neverstowe at the top. My cursor will go over to that screen. Yes, there it is, the Neverstowe in the A39. Quickly, then just on to more detailed, you have the big group of buildings on the east side of the road, large modern stuff to the rear, the smaller traditional stuff to the front, and then the site, which is currently just the top end of this large triangular field where the dwelling is proposed. So just for the purpose of the red line, the site is the top northern bit of the field. The very extensive land holding around this, and pretty much all the land we see to the east, west, and south is owned by the applicant. There are far-reaching views to the south, and that's where the concern comes in for ecology and bats that are foraging in the area. So the proposal for a single dwelling with a garden around it, within which there would there'll be some external lighting, and that is what is, of course, the main concern for the ecologists. The building itself has been redesigned to reduce the size of the window openings, particularly to that bottom south-facing elevation, just so we don't get light spill that would interfere with the way the bats are using the site. This is just a lighting contour plan. It's a bit faint, but you can see that the areas of light spill are to the front, as indicated by these contours, and to the rear, so basically from the windows to the north and the south elevation. I'm not sure how this slide is going to come out, but on the left is a sort of computer mock-up of the house with the lights on at night. On the right is the light spill drawings. The more intense the colour nearer the house, that's where it will be brighter. And what they're showing here is that lighting can be contained within the site, such that the lighting will not result in light pollution to the detriment of the bats and the special area of conservation that we are concerned about. So the applicants produced a shadow HRA, Habitats Regulation Assessment, that concludes that subject to safeguarding conditions to control lighting and to protect the hedges which the bats are using for commuting routes. Then, if we consider this either as a development proposal in its own right alone, it will be unlikely to affect the special area of conservation, the population of bats there, particularly the Barbastelle bats, and in combination with any other bits and bobs that are going on development-wise, they are saying that there will be no significant impacts on the bats foraging zone. And the conclusion, therefore, is subject to the recommendations in the Habitat Regulations report, which are essentially one, to control lighting of the building itself, another one to control lighting during the construction phase, and a third condition to safeguard the retained hedges. The conclusion there is that there will be no significant effect on the conservation objectives or integrity of the stack. We ask you to note that the findings of that report, and in the event that the application that follows in detail is approved, then this is our acceptance that the ecological impacts could be managed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. Any questions? No, in that case,
Chairman, I will say something a bit controversial. That's how it is. I find it amazing that a bit of light like this has been flashed up. You've got Hickney Point over the head. And you can see Walla Walla. I rest my case.
Yeah. Notwithstanding that, so I'll make the proposal because we need to vote on this, don't we? So I propose that we endorse the Habitat Regulation Assessment report. So I'm proposing that. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, I would say yes.
I don't know who was first.
He was.
Councillor Bradford, all those in favour, please show. And that's unanimous. Thank you. So that takes us on to the final application of the afternoon on page. Oh, yeah, of the same application, page 133, agenda item 8. Mr. Ning.
Thank you. So this moves on now to the detail of the proposal and the issues that it raises. So it is for this agricultural worker dwelling on the site of the yellow dot roughly. The same, obviously, the application site, the layout of the scheme here. There is to be noted here, there is a footpath, public footpath that currently goes across more or less the middle of this site, would be blocked by the footprint of the house. That is proposed to be diverted around this sort of northeastern edge as part of this application. There is the house design in itself, perfectly acceptable, subject to agreement of detailing if we are minded to approve it. In terms of the internal layout, the ground floors, we've got open plan living, with sort of a lounge, a farm office to the front left, and a utility room on the right there, and then upstairs 4 bedrooms with various bathrooms, ensuite, etc. There would be a new access will be created to the south to serve the new dwelling just down here. There would be just a new post and rail fence along here to define the extent of the garden, and then the hedgerow up along through here, which is existing, up to the existing entrance here, where it will be replaced. But this is the bit that we want to make sure we safeguard through the construction phase. Some photographs there. So looking at the existing entrance, it's basically just opposite the current farmhouse. You can see left-hand photograph, it's just on the right there, and then just looking at it in more detail. Then from that entrance, just looking north, visibility is not great, but it's not to a standard that causes any fundamental concerns. But it is the existing access, and we're looking to get some benefit out of this if we were to approve it for the new access. And then looking the other way from that, you can see there's quite a length of hedge. That's would all be retained in the new entrance just down there on the right. And then looking into the field, you can see you have extensive views. This is some of the concerns that start to come in now in terms of, firstly, the ecology bit we think we can address, because obviously the potential here for light pollution if it was dealt with badly. That, as the HRA you've just acknowledged, notes can be managed, but there is still the visual impact of an imposing dwelling on this site. So from these views, you can also see there are views coming back, and there are public footpaths down the right-hand side of the site on which this dwelling will be seen. There is just different time of the year for the existing entrance, and you can see the look footpath finger sign on the right there, which currently takes it around that. It goes across the field. That will be diverted around the perimeter of the house. Courtesy of Google Earth, just looking down there, you can see there's the entrance into the existing farm. So the modern working entrance straight on, the old entrance into the left, into the older group of buildings. And then just looking across from Google Earth again, across the site, those wide-ranging views. And then just looking again, courtesy of Google Earth, looking into the site, you can see the existing farmhouse and a range of traditional buildings there straight on in here, and then round to the back, main entrance to the working modern farm buildings. So just to remind you there, what we've looked into there, we have a very substantial range of large modern working buildings to the rear of the site, and a small cluster of more traditional buildings around the original farmhouse, which has accommodation on the end of it. So just to give you a flavour of those existing buildings, those are something we would normally expect people to maybe consider using for an agricultural worker dwelling if there is an opportunity to do so. The applicant has sort of said no, they're all in current use or they're not suitable. I've been on site, had a look around them. I have accepted their case that these aren't available. There's just a few more angles of those. And then to the rear of the site, these are big modern working buildings. Top right-hand corner picture is just a sort of maintenance shed, storage with agricultural industry. That's on the sort of south side near the entrance. The rest of the pictures are all the stuff towards the back site. So in terms of the key issues, as we have noted, there is no ecological objection to this, subject to appropriate safeguarding conditions. Highways have sought better improvements to the access arrangements. We can manage that. And we would, replant hedges, we would maintain the hedges around that, in the interest of those bats. In terms of the merits of the design of the house, no objection there either. We would like to agree the details of materials, in the event of an approval. We accept that there is a functional need to live on the site. This is a busy agribusiness. There's a lot going on here. We accept that need. We accept that there are no suitable properties nearby to buy, and that none of the other dwellings that the applicants own are available or are suitable to meet the needs of this on the site. The functional need on this site there at some distance. And as I say, the traditional buildings have been ruled out. We accept that the financial tests have been met. This is a very profitable business from the figures that I've seen. We don't doubt that they could support the wage of an agricultural worker. What we've not been able to agree here is that the siting that has been chosen, the visual impact of the siting. As you can see, the photographs are very prominent site, wide-ranging views. It's on the other side of the road in built form to that side of the road where there is currently none. And for that reason, that's the headline reason for refusal. Secondly, slightly second string reason for refusal, but I still think it's relevant in that the functional need is normally based on being there in sight and sound of the buildings and the activities that you are there to supervise, that justify the dwelling. This is on the other side of the road. It's on the other side of the existing dwelling. It's not in sight or sound of those buildings where the majority of the agricultural activities are occurring. I think if that was its only reason, that would probably fall away, but I put it in there because of the first reason. I accept that first reason as a subjective matter, but my recommendation is if you refuse for that reason, and no doubt members will debate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noon. We have 3 speakers on this application, and so I'd like to call, first of all, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Macalonan.
Yes.
Thank you, sorry, I do apologise. You have three minutes, just let us know when you're ready.
Okay.
Oh, you need to press the button.
Okay. Members of the Planning Committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of Mr. Barrow's application. I am a farm animal vet with 28 years experience. I have expertise in the areas of animal welfare, biosecurity and transmissible diseases. I am passionate about animal welfare and believe farm animals should receive the same level of care as a family pet. The Barrows animals are under my care. I know the farm intimately. The Barrows are a hard-working family who also want their animals to enjoy high standards of welfare. I have studied the application and believe the proposed site is the only suitable site. Mr. Barrow has a duty of care to his animals. This is a legal obligation. Care of animals is a 24/7, 365-day commitment. Proper care cannot be given remotely. To ensure high levels of welfare, farmers must live in close proximity to their animals. Living away from the farm stops Mr. Barrow carrying out his obligated duties. The proposed site is close enough to allow this. It is within sight and sound of the animals. It is also far enough away to allow a biosecurity buffer and a safe area to live from a health and safety perspective. Farms are food producing units. Building a dwelling adjacent to farm buildings is quite simply wrong. Visitors and vehicles carry a biosecurity risk. Diseases can be transmitted to the animals, and in the case of a notifiable disease, restrictions will be placed on visitors and vehicles entering the farm and the dwelling area. This is simply unworkable. Building the dwelling across the road allows there to be a buffer zone between house and farmyard. Farms are dangerous places. A recent health and safety executive report showed 27 deaths on farms in 22-23. Agriculture has the worst rate of fatalities of any major industry. Living with a family so close to the risks is wrong, but it is avoidable by building at the proposed site across the road. There was another suggestion to build in the paddock beside the 2 main cattle sheds. this area, the welfare paddock needs to be retained. It is vital in times of emergencies where instant access to the outside is required. Example, fire, burst pipe flooding, disease, injury. Stressed, ill, or scared animals do not simply follow the farmer to a safe haven. The welfare paddock provides refuge at the opening of a gate. I am looking at this proposal from an animal welfare point of view. I have studied the proposal and I know the farm inside out. The proposed site is the only suitable, in fact, perfect site for the dwelling. It is close enough for sight and sound, but far enough to negate any biosecurity or health and safety concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, good timing, thank you. Can I call Councillor Mike Caswell to the table, please? No, the 3 minutes. Just let us know when you'd like to start.
Thank you, Chairman, members. What is wrong with this application? Well, since sitting on this planning committee, I've always, when I've been asked to look at an application, look at the things we can complain about. And here we have, for the last 5 years, looked. Does it have an effect on the landscape? Well, I say no. If you drive up from Radlett, up through that road towards Halsey Cross, you will hardly be able to see this dwelling. Does it have an effect on the landscape? Fringe on the street scene? No, it doesn't. There are very few buildings there other than the farm across the road. Will it create traffic? No, absolutely not. The person that will live there will be working on that farm. Does it have an effect on road safety? I would say no, it will reduce it. Will it overshadow? No. So what is there? Or what is wrong with this application? This is simply a farm dwelling, an agricultural dwelling. That's just what it is. It's for the farm manager and his ever-growing family, which wants to live in the area where he lives now and grown up, etc., with his family. You've heard from the vet just then that 24-hour 365 availability is required. Now, in the old days, as one farmer will tell you in this establishment, that it was all you had to do to be a farm worker was to drive a Massey 35 tractor. Well, I can assure you now, with all the bureaucracy that they have to face, all the habitat regulations, etc., and all the runoffs they have to control, this is a very, very bureaucratic and totally, I can't think of the word that I want to use, because it is absolutely so fantastic the amount of work they have to do at this moment. We have in Sedgemoor, to my knowledge, permitted dwellings in flood zone 3. I could think of one in particular out in the North Petherton area, which was virtually under a Dutch barn. But we did it because of the need of the farm workers' dwellings. And we need to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caswell. Final speaker for the afternoon is James Wilding, please, who's agent for the application. So 3 minutes from whenever you start. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There is in principle policy support for the proposal, with the key matters of function and financial tests being satisfied. Officer or statutory consultee objections have resulted in revisions to the highway access into the field, a reduction in the size of the dwelling, habitat enhancement through an extensive planting scheme, and additional justification as to the site allocation. You will have received representation today from the farmers, the applicant itself and the vet, which confirms the site suitability and essential need for this dwelling, the sizable farm business and the welfare need of the livestock. The outstanding matter is siting scale and visual impact. The new access was requested by County Highways and it provides the sufficient visibility slays that we need to meet. The opening up of the hedgerow to form the new access is provided by, dare I say, translocation of an existing hedge. So no loss as suggested by the case officer. In addition, there will be infilling of the existing gateway and a further 47 metres of new hedgerow to be planted to the south of the site. Any impact from the provision of the new entrance is sufficiently mitigated through infilling and new planting, and therefore, in our opinion, this objection and reason for refusal is overcome. Regarding the size of the dwelling, it's noted as 266 square metres, which is incorrect. The floor space, which includes all of the ancillary agricultural space, is 233 square metres over 2 floors. In terms of affordability, they already own the site, therefore we're looking at the build cost alone, and that's going to be less than £500,000, which sounds a lot of money. But the nearest property on the market on Rightmove is a semi-detached for £525,000. This, I suggest, is an affordable and a site that offers better value for money alone. Regarding landscape impact, we've had a report done by a professional to consider the relationship of the AONB, which is 1.3 kilometres away, and it is accepted that there is no impact. Local Plan Policy D19 refers to development proposals within the AONB, but also development within the setting to cause harm. But it talks about being supported and impact negated through appropriate and acceptable mitigation, which is what we've done. We would therefore argue we've achieved this. The landscape of the site is not unique, but typical of the local character. The farmstead is predominantly stone and brick with pan tiles or slate. The design features incorporated into the subject proposal. And opposite, we have a large range of steel portal frame buildings. Much of the orchard to the north is now being replaced by orchard to the south. Overall, it will have no impact. We would hope, after all this, that councillors support the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Noon, is there anything you wish to respond or anything said?
Mostly to agree with quite a lot of what most of the speakers have said, in that there are no objections on all the other matters in relation to sort of highways, ecology, the design of the house. No, we're not challenging the functional requirement for another dwelling here. We're not challenging the financial. We're not saying the size is unaffordable for an agricultural worker. I think it just purely comes down to visual impact of the chosen siting. If the dwelling were on the other side of the road, even though it's quite a big dwelling and could be accommodated over there, I don't think we'd be here today. I think it is just down to that. I did hear, note what the veterinarian said about the functional requirement and whether that could be met in this site. Well, I leave that to others' judgment there. I do point out that the other dwelling probably has all the risks that he warned us against being where it is. So I'm not convinced by some of what was said there, but I'm not disputing that there is a functional need for a dwelling here, another dwelling here. It's just the visual impact that I'm raising a concern about, only purely that.
Thank you. I've got a couple of speakers, Councillor Hendry, and then Councillor Bradford, and then Councillor Filmer.
I read through the paperwork this twice, believe it or not, because I was so taken with the whole case and I find it difficult to understand why it's recommended to be refused. Functional need, I don't even have to go into this. This is just beyond reproach. I listened to the three speakers and everybody agree with them entirely from beginning to end. You cannot expect somebody, a farm worker, or should I say, I'll put it a different way. You have to consider a farm worker allowed his household on the other side of the road. What difference does it make by nowadays standards? Loads of farms have that houses on the other side of the road. The visual impact, Councillor Caswell, I think it was, pointed out that he knows the area well and he drives up down here. He said you wouldn't even hardly notice the place at all. And I actually believe that. I go along. As I said, the visual need absolutely fine. Highways, standard advice, ecology, not a problem. It ticks all the boxes. Everything goes down the list. There's absolutely no problem whatsoever. And it's unfair to ask the applicant to see they can utilise another building on the farm. That's not realistic, unfair and unjust. Everything about this, I think, is actually okay. I have no problem whatsoever. And I think, before this conversation goes any further, I propose we grant permission with the conditions as is. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take Councillor Bradford next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, this must be the first application regarding this committee, this particular planning committee for a very long time, I think. And that represents what's happening in agriculture. By God, it's important to keep people in agriculture. And a thing like this is paramount to what's needed, because we've got policies of rewilding going on left, right, and centre at present. And I'll just add, I've got to get this one right as well. Whether the Quantock Hills will be on top of me, and they're well away from that anyhow. But I do get a bit of controversy every now and again because I'm on that committee, believe it or not. And I think that most of the things have been handled today. The footpaths been diverted, the hedges been retained, and the functional need, which is the most important one. I'm a farmer. I know what it's like. It's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And when things don't go well, that's how it is. Now, the visual impact. Can that be handled by screening? Trees planted.
Mr. Noon, thank you, second.
Sorry, put you on the spot. I would have thought some mature trees planted here, there, around it would take a lot of the visual impact away.
I think if members are minded, yeah, to accept that the house in its own right wouldn't have a fundamentally objectionable a visual impact, then we can soften that impact with some planting. I think probably unreasonable to say it's going to be screened completely by planting, because just but yes, a landscaping condition would mitigate if members felt there was some outstanding mitigation to be needed.
Okay, thank you for that. And well, I have no hesitation in. I've got to go against the officer. Really, I'm going to move it. Well, I'll second it then.
Sorry, can I come back, Chair?
Sorry, condition.
Sorry, because Councillor Henry moved with no conditions. Councillor Bradford is moving with conditions. And there will be conditions on the planning commission because there are deemed conditions. Are you happy to remove the bit where it's no conditions? So it will be with the appropriate conditions.
Just saying that time and sheet, absolutely.
Appropriate conditions and Councillor Bradford, appropriate conditions.
Councillor Filmer.
Very little to add to everyone else. I do understand where the officers have come from, because ultimately the report we've had has shown there's been a good amount of negotiation between the officers and the applicant. We've heard that the size, the design, the access have all been tweaked. We've dealt with issues to do with the footpaths. Lighting has been addressed. We've got the reuse of the buildings would certainly be something I would be looking for normally. But we've heard from the officer that he's looked at those and actually they're not suitable for that. So that moves it on from there, because when I first saw this report, I was thinking this is going to be a no, but most of the reasons for no have all been addressed. The only one that was left was the visual impact. I think the suggestion of the landscaping plan is useful. And also, to be fair, my own view would be that seeing this building, you're going to see it in the context of the other agricultural buildings on the other side of the road anyway. And to be frank, the design they've come up with is a traditional design farmhouse. I think it will not look out of keeping in a rural setting anyway. So I would have been happy to go along with the recommendation that's gone before with the two previous members.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I'd broadly go along with what my colleagues have said. I don't really have a problem with the application. It looks fine in that locale. I just have a question for Mr. Noon, please, regarding excuse me, regarding the extant footpath. goes through the middle of the site. Do we have assurance or can we condition with your Grace, you mentioned that footpath is going to be diverted. Which way around is it going to go?
It's along that northwest side of the site. You see the sort of beige line just inside the red blue line.
Oh, I see.
That's the diverted footpath. At the moment, it goes more or less.
It does. It goes down.
And then you can see it will then pick up the footpath at the right event there. So that is something that the highways officer would require condition.
Okay, and if the applicant is ready to make that.
Yeah, that was their response to the footpath issue.
It's fine. And we have an assurance that should this go through, that while it's building, that there will be no obstruction via that footpath.
I've got a number of conditions, and that would be one of them. So I can suggest if that will help.
Yeah.
Just one. That's it.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
And the only other thing I was going to suggest, that as this is an overturn of the officer recommendation, we need to state reasons for approval, which I would suggest more or less a reversal of my reasons, namely that the proposal satisfies financial tests without harm to ecology, visual amenity, or highway safety, and as such complies with the policies referenced in the report. Conditions, because we do need to. There would be the standard time limit, standard plans, and agricultural occupancy condition. The 3 ecological safeguarding conditions recommended by the Habitats Regulation Assessment with regard to lighting and hedgerow protection. Highways officers suggested a couple of conditions just to secure the visibility displays and also the footpath diversion. I would suggest we probably need to agree the material site of the materials for the house. There may be changes, and we don't want to chain them to this particular drawing. And then the final one, which would be the landscaping one, just to secure the detail of that and those additional trees that someone mentioned. So
Councillor Hendry and Councillor Bradford, are you happy to proceed with your recommendation to grant permission based on those conditions attached as listed? Okay, thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder to grant permission. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous. That is unanimous. Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of the applications for today. We've just one other item on the agenda, and that is appeals received.
So that reception there, you're coming out, so they don't lock the door.
Dawn, would you like to take us through the, is there only one, isn't there? Only
Yeah.
one appeal received.
So in terms of the report, there's one appeal received for 94 Love Lane. It was formation of the driveway, including the drop curb, so refused planning permission, they've submitted an appeal. We have since had some appeal decisions come back, but that'll be included not the next committee, but the March committee.
Thank you. Any comments? Councillor Klein.
No, only could Mr. Bruce give us an update on the planning officers that we've got now? There seems to be excuse me, a few names that they don't recognise. Thank you.
Are we happy to close the meeting officially, and then I can update members?
The appeals received brings us to the end of the meeting, so I'll declare the meeting closed.